Hello, everyone. This is Today Explained live at South by Southwest on the Vox Media Podcast Stage. I'm Sean Rameswaram, and you know who this is. Governor Tim Walz.
Good to be with you, Sean. Thanks for coming out, everybody. I was mentioning him. These are the folks that didn't get the Michelle Obama tickets, so welcome. So, glad you're here.
I'm told she's next week. They're here for you.
Yeah, all right.
Okay, so because this is Austin, and Austin at least used to be weird, I'm not sure if it's still weird, I want to ask you a question about weird. Do you think these guys are still weird?
These guys?
No, these guys, those guys. Remember those guys?
Oh, those guys. Oh, hell yes. They are, yes. Look, obsessing with choices people are making about their own lives that has absolutely zero to do with you, that is weird. That might be too soft. That is really unnecessary. I don't know if we go to that. Yeah.
You were presumably chosen partially because of that moment, because you seemed to be particularly good at messaging. And I was scrolling through your Twitter over the past few months, and I saw one tweet that I thought was indicative of you still being better than your average Democrat at messaging. You said, "Elon Musk is a terrible president."
He threatened to sue me after that.
No, he didn't. Did he really?
Yes, he did. He threatened to sue me.
Where in the DMs?
Yeah, well, it was that, and I called him a Nazi, and that did not help. So that might have been overboard. But
he hates it when you call his Nazi salute a Nazi salute.
Yeah, no, I don't know. That'll be on my tombstone, I guess. The weird thing. Look, that whole thing came out of this, that these guys are scary. And it came that, Joe Biden was saying that the threat to democracy is real. And of course, he appears to be right over the last 42 days. But that's too overwhelming to people. And people would kind of write it off. And so I think stating the obvious on this, again, obsessing over people's, who they love, obsessing over their personal choices, those things, just is not the way normal people go about their daily life. And so I was trying to ratchet down the stress of that, again, have to be careful, fascists, Nazis, whatever things are doing, to ratchet that down to a point where people could process it because it's real. But the one thing that's kind of for me about that, I worry that if it sounds flippant, when people's lives are being put in really tough situations, and whether it's Medicaid or Social Security or demonizing parts of our communities, I don't want to make it sound flippant in that, but this is just, I feel like we're that, that old adage, the frog in the boiling water, and they keep turning up the heat. It's boiling, people. Jump out. That's what I'm trying to say. Get out of the pot right now while we can. And that was where that came from.
Did you watch the joint session this week?
Yeah, parts of it I did.
I felt like the messaging from the Democrats was muddled at that joint session. Some didn't show up at all. Some left early. Some wore pink and held up these feeble signs that said, false, or this is not normal. We all saw Representative Al Green protest.
Yeah.
And
I served with Al Green. That is a good man.
But there wasn't a unified message. Did you want to see something more unified from your party?
Yes. Other than bidding on an antique tea set or whatever was happening. So yes, I wanted something more than that. But look, I think for all of us, it was, Will Rogers made that case in the 30s that I don't belong to any organized party. I'm a Democrat, and the herding cats piece of that. But what I know is, and at least I'm hearing it from my constituents in Minnesota, and I'm hearing it across the country, there's a primal scream of do something. Do something. Now, I have the advantage as a governor. I can do something. We can put up firewalls against them. You're not going to demonize our people. We're going to continue to make sure our children are fed. I called the premiers of Ontario and Manitoba and said, look, the official policy is theirs, but we like you. We like Canadians. We like what we trade together. And so that message of how to do it, and I'm making the case look, when I get asked this, what should we be doing? I'm probably the last guy. I didn't get it done, and we needed to win. And that's where we're in this pickle, because we didn't win. But I'm being reflective of what I could have done better, what I should have done better. I don't have a big solution, but what I think for all of us is what's encouraging to me, these town halls, the kind of organic folks bringing up. There's not going to be a charismatic leader ride in and come up with this just perfectly delivered message that's going to get us out of this. It's going to be a whole bunch of people who don't want to see kids go hungry, who don't want to see healthcare ripped apart, who don't want to throw Ukraine under the bus on the side of Russia. Those folks are going to stand up and make a difference. So yes, in answer to your question, yes, it's frustrating, but it's hard. I served for 12 years in Congress, and someone said, would you like to go back? I said, I would rather eat glass than go back to Congress.
Why is that?
It's frustrating now. You can't get things done. And look, I came from since 1892 in the congressional district where I was at, 2 Democrats won that seat. I got reelected in 2016 for the last time. Donald Trump won that district by 18 points, and I won. And I had the same positions or whatever. Now, I'll acknowledge to you, it has shifted dramatically. I probably couldn't win that congressional district having the same positions. And what's happened with that is it eroded to the point where you don't have the crossover. In 1972, of the 435 congressional districts, upwards of 300 of them cross-voted on the ticket. President of one party, member of Congress on the other. Those have shrunk now. I think it's down to 4, that polarization. And that makes it difficult to get done. And as a governor, I can do things, and I don't want to hold up a bidding paddle when President Trump is lying about what the future is going to hold for us. So
James Carville said in a New York Times op-ed this week that, or maybe it was last week, that that the Democrats should sort of roll over and play dead, let the Republicans have their way with the government, anger voters to the point that they're repulsed by their policies, and then go for a shot in the jugular. What do you think of that strategy?
Well, I don't agree with it, and I don't agree with it in this, that, well, first, this idea that people need to feel the pain. I'm going to do all I can as governor. What I said, it's going to be painful. But I said to my team is that we protect the most vulnerable and we protect our gains. That's what we're going to do. Now, I know that what James is saying is when somebody's digging a hole, let them keep digging. Don't get in. I'm kind of the adage, especially with these guys, let's help them dig and get this hole done faster so people start flipping and we can start fixing this thing quicker. So I don't think just setting back and letting the policies that are go for it. This isn't simple disagreement on tax rates, simple disagreement on how much we should do on defense spending versus domestic or whatever. This is an all-out assault around Article 1 of the Constitution. Again, I don't want to overreact, but I said this last week and I stand by this. The road to authoritarianism is littered with people saying you're overreacting. And I think that piece of it, of speaking out, matters. So I think you let this fester. Look, do I think they're going to implode and make a difference? Yeah, but look, I'm the guy who thought the messaging is we should enact the child tax credit, make it permanent because it reduces childhood poverty by 1/3. The majority went with they're eating dogs and cats as the message. So I'm not immune to saying maybe that's not the right way. I just think there was space that we left unoccupied, and I think Donald Trump's superpower is he will fill that space, and truth becomes difficult to dissect for folks. So no, I don't think that's right. I think you leave that stuff out there, it festers, it metastasizes. I think we have to be back out there and pushing back every single time.
Since you understand how Congress works, you were there. What would you be doing if you were there right now? It seems like Democrats, they don't have power. They can't do much. James Carville is saying, great, you don't have to. Let them mess this up. But if you were sitting there right now, what do you think you would be doing or saying? Yeah,
it's hard. And the thing about Congress, some of the folks with less hair in here remember this. Remember that I'm just a bill sitting on Capitol Hill? That's total bull crap. It doesn't work that way. But look, it was relationships. It was things that you could do. I'm not there, so this is second guessing. And again, if I'm criticizing anybody in Congress, they are rightfully to say, says my son did this. I got a 17-year-old, and I'm giving him wisdom from a father. And in the middle of that wisdom lecture, he said, says the guy who got his ass kicked by Donald Trump. And so I'm like, okay, fair enough. So I don't want to be the guy to lecture them, but I don't think you give them a single vote on these unqualified members of the cabinet. And I think you make it clear that the American public, you're voting for them. I didn't find a single constituent. I represent the best healthcare systems, and I know that MD Anderson will complain, but Mayo Clinic is in my district. And we do really well on healthcare. I haven't met a single one of my constituents that thinks that ignoring measles is a good thing. And so I don't think you give them a vote because it legitimizes them in some way. But again, I'm not there. I will say this, and I don't want to. You should never vote to censor Al Green for speaking up to when there was a lie being said. I'll just say that.
Okay, I got one more practical question about Congress, and then we'll move on. But funding for the federal government set to run out on Friday. How do you want to see Democrats navigate that one?
This is the really difficult question, and this is where it's going to sound like a bit contradictory on my part. This idea of not wanting people to suffer or whatever. This is one of those cases, though. This is their responsibility. Things like the debt ceiling. Just be very clear. Nobody, when your party has power, it's your responsibility to raise the debt ceiling. And that's to pay the bills that have already been done. That's not increased spending. And every single time, people don't want to do that because it's like bad messaging. But you've got to do it. So when George Bush was president, he needed to get a few Democrats to vote to raise the debt ceiling so they could pass the budget. I voted for it because they're responsible. When Barack Obama needed it to rise the debt ceiling, I voted to do that. So I'm part of doing that. I would argue we're in a different time and what's happening right now. And I think if the Republicans can't pass a budget with the presidency, the House, and the Senate, you let them figure that part out. And if the government shuts down. Now, here's what I worry about is, if you're a billionaire, you don't care if the government shuts down. Just like if you're a billionaire, you don't care if Social Security's not there. No more than you care if there's a local public pool because you got one in your backyard. So I worry that these folks don't care as much about the I care deeply about the shutdown because it will have an impact. It will have an impact on states. I can only backfill so much. But I think if you don't do that, and if you give them the votes to pass this horrific budget just to avoid a shutdown, we're only prolonging the pain. We're going to have to go through this, and we're going to have to get it done. So I would hope they make the Republicans pass this and own it. If you want to cut Social Security and Medicare, then go ahead and do that, but you're going to go home and own it. And look, if you can win an election cutting Medicare and Social Security, good for you, I guess, but I don't believe you can.
People are looking to Congress.
A smattering. That's called a smattering.
We have a smattering of applause for the governor. People are looking to Congress for opposition, but it's harder there because they don't control anything.
It is harder.
It's easier, actually, for blue state governors like you.
Yes.
You mentioned calling Canada, having conversations with premiers. What's your relationship been like with the federal government in the past 2.5 months or so?
I'm not incarcerated, so I've avoided that, no, not great, because they don't necessarily care, and I just have to say, governors are the most bipartisan. We still have an organization. It's just being really strained called the National Governors Association, because governors don't get a posture and take a symbolic vote. You've got to literally make the trains run on time. You've got to get things done. So there's a commonality amongst the 50 governors, and they're very close together. And we shared things. And I tell this with you because during the pandemic, Donald Trump wasn't doing anything, but the vice president, Mike Pence, was a former governor. Mike Pence was making calls offline to the governors like me, helping me find PPE, helping us do something. He was doing what he could do. And I don't agree with much of his politics, but he was doing, and that was really important. And the agencies we could call to now. We don't even know. So last week, we're the center of egg, and this is where I brag. We produce more turkeys in Minnesota than any other state in the nation. So, birds are important. And
Go
this
birds.
issue on H5N1, egg prices and things like that, we're ground zero for this, and we're really good at biosecurity. We're leading and doing these things, and great researchers with, between us and the companies. And the Trump administration just started ripping the people out who do that, funding, things like that. That is incredibly damaging, and there's no one to really communicate with. And up until this time, even the first Trump administration, I could pick up the phone and get somebody on there. I had a relationship with Sonny Perdue, who was the ag secretary. I don't know the ag secretary now. I saw her first interview last Friday where she told us the solution to H5N1 was to raise chickens in your backyard, which is not a bad thing to do. I know some of you in here are doing it, but
In Austin.
In Austin. But that's not the solution. So look, in answer, and this is scary because these relationships together, governors are very bipartisan. We have something, when I was in Congress, we created called the Council of Governors, where we work on issues of security, whether it's hurricanes or the use of the National Guard. And I was the co-chair of that until a few weeks ago, where I got a notice that I was no longer the co-chair of that, which was expected. I guess that was the right. But is that organization still holding? Is that communication still happening? Right now, it's very strained. That, look, governors don't matter. And I'm just going to be candid. It is so unconscionable that a president of the United States would pick and choose and make demands of California after wildfires and not say anything about South Carolina, or threaten the governor of Maine for simply following state law. And I can tell you, I didn't agree with much of George Bush's policies, but when we had a flood or a natural disaster, he was on the ground. His team did everything possible, and we recovered from that. I know I'm being a little nostalgic here. I'm one of those people. I ran for Congress in 2006 because I'm school teaching, shouldn't be doing this or whatever, but I'm so damn mad because it cannot ever get any worse than George Bush, and I need to do something. And that's my pro tip of the day. It can always get worse. So,
do you guys have a group chat, you and the other governors?
Yes, we do.
Who's in it?
I talk quite often to Governor Whitmer, to Governor Evers. I'm with Governor Pritzker. I just got a call. I have to call back from this with Governor Hochul in New York. Governors across the country talking together, trying to figure this out. And all of us right now, and I think the conversation that Governor Hochul wants to talk about is these relationships with our Canadian counterparts. It shouldn't be a surprise to you. We have border issues, and that border issue is it's difficult now in northern Minnesota because of all the trade we have to do back, and the Canadians are as mad as a Canadian can get. They're mad. And talking this, which I find really interesting, is I know Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford. He's a conservative by Canadian standards, but he's leading, and he's talking about this. And governors are together talking, are there things that we can do? And look, we have to follow federal law. I was in the Netherlands last week, 3 days after the vice president gave a speech in Munich that shook up the NATO alliance over 80 years. And I said, look, that's the official position of the United States government. It's not the majority position of the people of America. And here's some of the things that we can do legally to keep our relationships going. And that's what governors are doing. Governors are out there leading this. And I think you're right in all fairness, because I know I'm crapping all over Congress, and I don't mean to do that. I'm Minnesotan. Yes, I do. I'm passive aggressive. And so I do mean it. I don't want to be good, but look, I'll accept my responsibility. We're in this pickle because we didn't win in November. I'll own it. But now, are we going to set back? Are we going to figure out what to do? Governors are leading that, and I would encourage you, if you're interested in this, to encourage your governors, because they do have some capacity to do that.
Have they done anything you liked? They've done a lot. Have they done anything you thought, well, that's helpful?
Yeah, that's a fair question, because I know, I don't want to be that.
It sounds like there's plenty you don't like.
Yeah, you're right. Man. Okay, two things, and especially today. Two things. I'll mention this, especially tonight. I think I come down on Trump's side on daylight savings time. So he started talking about that. I'll give you that. So
someone over there too.
I'll give you that one. And believe it or not, this is bizarre. In Congress, you find your own niche or whatever on this. By the way, my proudest achievement signed into law, because I thought this was a flex during the campaign. I am the poorest person to ever run for vice president. I passed the Stock Act that wouldn't let you had to disclose if you were trading stocks in Congress or whatever. So I'm pretty fiscally conservative. So here's the thing. I heard Donald Trump talk about this, and I'm with him. I think we should get rid of the penny. I think it's outlived its thing. So, yeah, the world's melting down around us, but Donald and I are solving the penny crisis. So I am bipartisan.
It costs 3-point-something cents to make. It doesn't make any sense.
All those damn pennies in your closet. So
let's talk about 2024 for a minute here. Yeah. Not because I want to dwell on the past, but you brought it up that you guys didn't win. I want to better understand why not. You guys didn't swing a single swing state in your direction. A lot of people were stunned by that.
Minnesota.
Does Minnesota count?
Yeah, Minnesota's.
We're counting Minnesota.
I gotta have.
If you didn't win Minnesota,
I gotta have something to hang my hat on here. We won Minnesota. There you go. All right.
All right. Apart from Minnesota, not great on the swing states. Were you surprised? Were you stunned?
Yeah, and I tell you this, that when you're in this business, you've got to be just, steely-eyed and cold-hearted about where things are at. I lived through the 2010 Tea Party movement. I won in 2016, like I said, when Donald Trump, and I've been through tough elections, and I'm just very, very practical about this. It felt like we were going to win. Now, I will acknowledge maybe I was in the bubble. I wasn't seeing a lot of this. But I was convinced that Donald Trump was going to get somewhere around 77 million votes, which was, the people around me thought, because look, if you fly flags off your truck and you've got a Donald Trump buffed out muscle builder t-shirt, you're voting for Donald Trump. My fear was that we had to get 77 million and one, and how are we going to get them? I thought we were doing that. I thought with the organization that was out there, the things that we were doing, and again, because of where it's at, and I have come clear on this, I'm not a huge fan of the Electoral College. I spent my time in about 7 swing states and felt like I was getting down to where folks were at. Obviously not. And I think the soul searching that comes with that is why did our message about focusing on the middle class, expanded health care, Medicare hope for home health care work, environmental issues, why did that not work? Because it felt like to me that it was resonating, and it did not, and we didn't. And I think the team around me said this, we'll either win all 7 or we'll lose all 7 on this. I think that they thought because these things are so nationalized now that it didn't matter I'm in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, talking to folks who are up in Erie, or you're in Waukesha, Wisconsin, the national narrative over the top of that was going to drive it. And it felt like we were there, and I, drinking my own Kool-Aid or whatever, and that's on me. I said I own that.
You've been doing soul searching. Is there one thing you wish you could take back, or are there, a half dozen or so? If there's one thing you could take back or do over, what do you think it would be?
One thing I will not take back is when I said he was skipping like a dipshit. I own it. I'm not taking it back. I'm not taking that back. Yeah, I think I would have taken back getting myself sucked into the conversation around what was happening in Springfield, Ohio. It hit me on the heartstring on this. And look, I know my weaknesses on this. I am a sucker. If somebody's nice to me, I'll be nice to them type of thing. This one it so struck me like reprehensible that they were saying this about people that I was in a 3 or 4 day debate making my case that this is not happening in Springfield, Ohio. And every time I was saying that, we were talking about Springfield, Ohio and immigration. We weren't talking about other things that mattered to people. And I went down that line trying to do, I think, morally the right thing. It turns out how much have you heard about Springfield, Ohio, by the way, since that election? Just like egg prices and everything else. But none of that matters. They knew exactly what they were doing. They knew exactly about setting that, that bomb out there and grab it. And then I think I would have, I would have done more of this. They set me up for a small room with a few truly undecided voters. Everyone undecided, and I'm thinking, how the hell can you be undecided at this point? Well, people are busy, and there were things out there, and they put me in the room with them, and they let me do 30 minutes of talking to them. And I think of the 5, I think I got 4 of them that might have gone. And it's like, it's not because, your boyish good looks won them over. No, I was talking to them about where they were at in their lives a little bit more. And I don't think, and look, this is me, and I don't think we were present enough. And what Donald Trump has mastered is he floods the zone to the point where you don't get to make your point. And it doesn't matter if it was eating dogs and cats, because it was immigration and people were uncomfortable with immigration. And so I would do that differently.
I don't think Vice President Harris has been asked this, but I bet one thing she wished she could take back was that moment in that interview with The View where she said she wouldn't change a single thing the Biden administration was doing. I think that, I'm sure the right loved that, and I think a lot of people on the left were stunned by that. Now, she's not here, so I can't ask her, but let me ask you, in that moment, had that question been posed to you, what were things that you think you could change that the Biden administration was doing or doing wrong? Yeah,
and I would just say this, I think if there's a fault in that, it is about loyalty. It is about, being there. And look, I'm guilty of this too. And when you're in this, you're saying you're going to be loyal to someone over the risk of 330 million people or global peace or things like that. I'm not going to criticize that. I think it's there. I get asked about what I would do differently myself in things that I made. I think it is reflective. I think it's really hard when you're talking about someone else. But I think for me, that, yes, you have to say that. What would you have done differently? What would you have done differently during COVID? What would you have done differently during the unrest during George Floyd's murder and things? There's a responsibility to do that. I think the biggest fault we had, if what we would have done differently, is we needed to not cede the playing field. Trump was, I thought this was a winner on the campaign trail. I said, if there's no other reason to vote for us, you won't have to see the president on TV every 2 seconds and we'll never hear from him again.
But that's what Joe Biden wanted too, right? What did you think the Biden administration could have been doing better for the American people?
I think they should have been out there telling us that the inflation was real and this hurt. I think, if in retrospect, which is 2020 hindsight type of thing, I think there should have been talk about sending, especially in the summer of 23, potentially sending, stimulus checks to folks to try and counter some of that and making it clear that we were fighting for them. Look, I think you were always going against this idea of change. It was a change election. It's happened globally. We needed to be the change. And with that statement, more than anything, was a lot of great work was done by the administration. We do have the best economy, but that doesn't matter on a micro scale to someone if they can't afford their rent payment. And I think we needed to do a better job of getting in of like what we've done, what we've accomplished, because people forgot about it. And I think it's a very progressive thing to do. You solve a problem, you move to the next thing. You solve a problem, you move to the next thing. I don't think we do what Donald Trump does. That guy, I'm assuming at one time he hit a good golf shot. I bet he talks about it every day to people, like every single day until it becomes part of that. We just kind of move on. And I think the administration did a lot of good things. I don't think they leaned into the inflation enough, and look, guilty of that too. But in fairness to the vice president, had it been me in that moment, I might have made that same thing, might have said, and I think that's, we as Democrats better do some soul searching about that. Why would we do that? It's not like we're blindly loyal like, the Trump folks are, but it's okay to criticize people you like. In fact, that's what you need. You got to surround yourself with people who aren't yes people to tell you that you didn't do a very good job on this or you should change this. We didn't do that. We didn't do it.
How many votes do you think Liz Cheney won you guys?
Not enough, say that. So obviously it's not enough. Look, I think there was that strategy, and I've come to it. I come from that bipartisan district. I'm a bit agnostic. I just want to see solutions. There's a temptation to do that. I think in this election, I would still go back to, I think whether they're there or not, he was going to get 77 million votes. The question is, what you asked is, how did we get 77 million and one? How did we get to that? And that's a choice you make at the time. Is that the right way? Was it the disenfranchised Trump voters that we were going to get? It turns out it was a lot of young men, 18 to 25, and a lot of white suburban women. Now, did Liz Cheney, would she be able to win them over? Maybe as well as anybody, but not as much. I will say this: I served with Liz Cheney. I didn't agree with anything. I am grateful that she was willing to put herself and her family out there to say I was wrong about this, and I'm trying to do the best. So I think we should lift up those people who do it. But I don't know if that was going to be the winner. We come together as a party, you compromise, you're not going to agree on everything. I have been a believer what I did in Minnesota. We took a majority in 2022 by one vote, and I just went all FDR on them, and we passed all the New Deal stuff there, paid family and medical leave, protect reproductive rights, free meals for students and things. And I'll make these, the fear was, this guy's super liberal. Oh yeah, it's a really crazy idea to feed our kids so they have a full belly when they learn. It's a really crazy idea to make sure people have health care, because look, I always said this to my students when I'm teaching. I work really hard for you because I have an ethic to try and do that, because I want you to achieve the greatest things you can achieve in your life. But it's not totally altruistic on this. I want you to get a good job so you pay your taxes so I can collect my Social Security. I want you to get a good job so you don't come to my house and steal my lawnmower. There's things that making the case. So these progressive policies that make people, because I think, look, you tell me this audience would tell you this. I think there's a lot of people that in America didn't know what Democrats stood for and say, is there that much difference? I knew when I was growing up, my family wasn't very political. My dad dies. I'm 19. My little brother's in elementary school. I became a Democrat because I saw Democratic policies like Social Security survivor benefits make a difference. So the policies are the things that draw people in. I think there's a whole bunch of people didn't see that. And I don't think we told them what happens if you elect us. I'll tell you now, in 2028, you better not run and say, what we're going to do is tinker around health care, and then you can deal with your insurance company about this. You got to be a little bolder on what fixes the problem, if you believe that's a problem. If you don't believe health care is a problem, don't run on it. But we try and run on it, and we don't tell them what it's going to look like when we're done. And in fact, if we get elected and you don't get it done, boy, that's a killer. You lose people on that. And I think there was, my opinion on that, there was some of that.
You're talking about policies instead of people, let's say. You know, you watch the RNC, you don't see the Bushes on stage. You certainly don't see the Cheneys. But you watch the DNC and you still see the Obamas and the Clintons. Do you think it's time that, I mean, I'm not going to say, you know, don't put Barack Obama on stage, don't put Michelle Obama on stage, but do you think it's time the Democratic Party refresh a little bit, put some fresh faces on there? Because here we are, and there's still, no one has any idea who's coming next.
Yeah. Well, I will say this. The DNC was a good party on that. I thought it would do something better than them. But yes. And I'm going to say, can this be our bar? Let's have our 2028 candidate have hair.
Ouch. Took yourself out of the race.
I'm self-reflective on this. Look, I don't want to downplay that. We just need to, whoever it is needs to win, and we need to understand that. But I don't deny this sense of the future. Now, with that logic or whatever, look what the Republicans did. I said this, we don't have term limits in Minnesota, and you do a 4-year term. I've done 2 of those. I could finish my term now and do 4 more terms as governor and be younger than Donald Trump. So this idea that, well, the Republicans are young and fresh or whatever, that's not totally true either. But I do think they engage people more. They're more willing to give them that, especially. And I think it feels like there's a bottleneck in elected office where it's the choice shouldn't be between running your parents for the Senate or putting them into a home. That should not be the choice. And we get a little bit, or for governor, fair enough. No hair, I get it. So.
The Trump administration, the Trump campaign seems to mostly run on, you know, the economy, immigration, but they get into office and it feels like they're mostly focused on draining the so-called swamp and wokeness. Now, the wokeness they seem to be campaigning against, some of it started in your state with the murder of George Floyd. And it seems like they are betting that the majority of the American people, or at least their base, thinks that there was an overcorrection after the death of George Floyd, whatever happened with BLM and DEI. What do you think about that?
On that case, if somebody didn't know, they're Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Elon Musk started it with some of these about pardoning Derek Chauvin, who murdered George Floyd. Just so you all know, if he were pardoned on the federal charges, he will come to Minnesota and he will do 22 and a half years in state prison. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But I don't believe they're interested in pardoning Derek Chauvin for that. We all saw it. They're interested in the social aspect that it generates in people. And so, but look, I think we have a difficult time explaining things, and I think we do get a bit pure rather than telling people why it is. So when you see people running away from DEI, the folks who are against DEI, first, I think many of them don't understand what it is. But I think the first who understand what it is against it, I'm going to make the case that I think those people were against desegregation too. They're against DEI and they're against desegregation. I think those go hand in hand. But I think we as Democrats don't need to do it just to treat. We need to show results of what's happening. The reason that we have to, say for Minnesota, a state like Minnesota, we're older, northern, we've got a dynamic economy, but we're aging. And this is true across the globe, whether it's Norway, whether it's Japan. And we're going to see our workforce in Minnesota, 70% of our workforce over the next 20 years are going to be people of color. Like, it behooves us to find, educate, train, and be ready to have those folks there. So it's not just like a feel-good thing, it's the right thing to do. That diversity, that equity, and that inclusion of people make sure that we are best positioned, both morally to do the right thing, but also for the strength of the economy and the social fabric. And I think we have not done a good job of explaining it. And look, I don't know, you have a whole bunch of top military officers, only 2 you fire are a woman and a black man. I think we need to name that when it happens, just to be clear, need to name it. But we also need to tell the average person, who I do not believe is racist, but doesn't understand what we're saying. And they have been conditioned by the other side that we are somehow passing over well-qualified white males to put these people in there. I think we as Democrats have a great example to rebut that. Just look at the cabinet. Just look at this current cabinet. If that's the best and brightest coming from the other side, we seriously, that we should make that case about accountability. And so, yes, look, I don't deny this. Do I think we're losing elections and folks in the middle doing this? Yeah, I think it's costing votes. But I think, and I say this as a teacher, I always said this, if I would teach a lesson and then I would give a quiz on it and half the class would fail it, I didn't assume that half wasn't very smart. What I assumed is the method that I used to teach hit part of the class but didn't hit another because of their learning styles or whatever it might be. So I want them to learn this geography concept. I should teach it in 3 or 4 or 5 different ways to make sure I'm as broad as possible that they got the concept on that. I think we teach DEI one way on this instead of being more strategic about how we talk about it, because I don't believe my neighbors think it's a horrible thing to make sure everybody's got a shot to be able to succeed, and that helps all of us. So yeah, I think we're not doing a good job with that. I think it is electorally hurting us, but more importantly, it's hurting real people in their real lives, and it's throwing up those systemic barriers that have held us back for generations that I think we're getting at. So look, it was dramatic for Minneapolis. The world saw that. We as a state of Minnesota, we're not changing away from our diversity, our equity, and inclusion. We're being smart about how we do it, and we're continuing forward.
Minnesota has some of the best education numbers in the country.
Because they have great teachers. So.
But also something that you're well aware of called the Minnesota paradox, where you guys also have some of the greatest disparities in education employment numbers between white and black.
Yeah.
You have declared racism a public health crisis. Yep. Did doing that fix anything?
It's improving it. It hasn't fixed it. Look, being Minnesota, and we're stoic people. We're proud. We were the first state. We became a state in 1858. We were the first state to give troops to the Union to fight in the Civil War. So our schools, we taught everybody, we're the good guys in this fight. We were there. I think we know that's all not the way our history is. It's much more nuanced, if you will. I had a woman who used to live in Arkansas, and then she said she moved into Minnesota, and she says the racism is quieter but meaner here, and which broke my heart. And what Sean's mentioning is that we have some of the highest achievement standards. We are some of the highest health outcomes, some of the highest incomes, some of the highest home ownership things, until you desegregate that data and you find out we have some of the lower ones when it comes to the black community, or the gap is bigger. Now, part of that gap is explained by our top is higher, but there's still a gap. And so the lack of generational wealth, the lack of home ownership, the lack of opportunities in those communities holding us back. So Minnesota has not only a moral responsibility, it is draining down on our economy. It's pulling down on that. So we acknowledge, look, for a long time, you got a pass as an elected official, especially white elected officials, by admiring the problem. Oh, we do really well, but we've got an issue with the achievement gap. And that's about where that would end. And they're like, oh, he's really woke, or whatever it would be. He really recognizes it. Then it became about how do we empower these communities to do that. And this is what breaks my heart. We had some great programs, and we have great institutions of learning. Augsburg University is one. That is that we have a lot of these Norwegians and Swedish colleges in Minnesota. My wife's a graduate of Gustavus Adolphus College. They're very focused on this. They're very focused. They're Lutherans, and they're focused on this mission. One of the things they were doing is these incredible programs. What we know is that achievement in the classroom, sure, you got to get the kids some food, you got to get them housing, you got to get some of Maslow's basics of that. But the biggest thing that makes a difference is if there's a teacher in that classroom that looks like them, and you're starting to get that. So recruiting and retaining teachers of color, especially black men, is really important. These universities were doing it. And they're producing us a new generation of teachers, teachers of color. The work at the federal government under Donald Trump defunded all of those programs, every single one of those. So now, in the name of getting rid of DEI and bringing us back to this, that is going to perpetuate the Minnesota paradox on this again, and we're going to get the achievement, which I think is a microcosm of this whole issue in America of systemic barriers that, yeah, we're doing really well. And it's that thing you can say, oh, my kids love our public schools. And in Minnesota, I use this as the litmus point of where we had to do it. I go to the hospital, I go to Hennepin County Healthcare, and there's 2 children born there. One is black and one is white. I can predict with pretty good accuracy the education attainment level, the home ownership level, the life expectancy level, the maternal mortality rates that would all go into that there are social determinants of health and successes that are baked into the system. Now, when we talk about that, that's apparently what drove them absolutely crazy, and Americans voted against it. I think you talk to Americans about this is the problem. This is what we're trying to address when we talk about DEI, and it's good for you, too. It's good for your community. It's good for your bottom line, and I don't think we do that very well. So no, it's not long way around. It's not solved. But we're moving in that direction. The gap is starting to close. But again, this is a zero-sum proposition. Until that gap is totally closed, we're failing. So
let's talk about white men for a second. You were clearly chosen because they thought you'd speak to them. You're a hunter, a coach, a teacher, but you seem like a nice guy. They chose the felon, the guy on tape saying he likes to grab women without their consent. Why do you think that is? Why don't the Democrats speak to white men right now?
Yeah, I don't know. I should know. I am the stereotypical white guy. Look, I knew I was on this ticket because I've won out there. I've done that. I'm proud of this. I don't beat in my chest about it. They apparently thought 24 years of service wasn't enough. It doesn't matter what we say, they will attack it. Oh, he's not a real coach, he's a defensive coordinator. Says that guy, type of thing. Oh, he can't really hunt because we said that. And I was worried about this, about being a character. I'm proud of being a coach, but I'm also a really good geography teacher. I also, did my time in the military. I spend time doing something, not like you shouldn't get patted on the back for doing the things you're supposed to do. I think what we have is a generation, and my son is in this, that went through the Great Recession, born about that time, or certainly after, watched their family struggle. They went through COVID. We went through the first Trump presidency, and here we are. There's a generation of young men trying to understand where do they fit in, where do they go, what happens. And they're being told that the reason that they're struggling on some of these things is because we're giving too many opportunities to women, or we're giving too many things. I keep saying this, I don't know why in this country we seem to think things like rights, oh, it's like a pie. If I give somebody a bigger slice, I get less. It's not a damn pie. You can give rights to everyone, and you're not diminishing from someone else. And I think for whatever reason, we have created some angst. And look, middle class is hurting. Their economic, I heard this statistic. I think it's close to this. In 1995, the average age of a first-time home buyer was 29. Last year it was 42. Student loan debt. Oh, we can't pay back student loan debt. We did it ourselves. You know why you did it yourself? When I attended the University of Houston, it was $12 a credit hour. It was $144. It was paid for on the front end by people's taxes that left me with no debt. But now all of a sudden, if we try and pay back and get these young men their education or pay this student loan back, they're freeloading or whatever. I think we put them in a really tough spot. Jobs are changing. Cultural dynamics are changing. And my job was, look, I own it and I failed. My job was to help win Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, to go into those union halls. First vice presidential candidate to be a card-carrying union member, maybe ever. First one in 40 years that wasn't a lawyer. As I said, the Wall Street Journal, and they did it with you could tell it was dripping with, look at him, he's poor, he's one of the poors. I thought it was a flex that while in Congress, I didn't trade stocks. And you know why I didn't own stocks before that? Because I worked as a public school teacher and I was happy just to have a defined benefit pension plan. That's how it worked. That didn't resonate with people. So your question is, I don't know the answer yet. But what I do know the answer is not to message more like them. I don't believe that, whether it's the misogyny or the hatefulness or whatever, but I find it interesting every time one of these, the things that my daughter was during the campaign, she would find things that would leak out or whatever, get out, and she goes, there's a lot about you I didn't know, But I thought the one that was just, I couldn't wrap my mind around it. They did 2 days of a whole segment Because I bought a malt in North Carolina and drank out of a straw, which of course, that's not what an alpha male does. I'm like, well, how the hell do you drink it? I don't know. And is this the litmus test for your vice president, whether he drinks out of a straw or not? But you know what? There has to be something there. They leaned into it. They put effort into it. And they really spent a lot of time and money telling you, and I think it's because I think the weird thing bugged the crap out of them. Because you know why? Because I think they know they are. That's my take on it. I think they know they are. And they said, this guy just seems like kind of the dude that down the street or whatever, which, by the way, that shouldn't be your only qualification to be vice president. I do have some other accomplishments. I can fix my international, but that is not why you're voting for it. But the point is this is what other people do more in the mainstream. They chose about the most exact opposite of a middle-class Midwestern guy, a New York failed real estate mogul, to do the job, and a hedge fund manager. I don't know. I don't have your answer. But I don't think we should trade our values. I don't think we should continue to stand up for those less fortunate. And I think that there's a responsibility of white men to contribute back into their communities in a way that is helpful. I don't know.
There's some
smattering.
You got a smattering. We'll get you another one. There's some cognitive dissonance in this country right now because some people can't believe that we're canceling aid to African children, that we're deporting migrants the way we're doing it, that we're treating trans people the way we're treating them. And then it seems like half the country's pleased as punch about it all, which is confusing. It feels like we're losing a sense of ourselves. But you just spent months crisscrossing the country, shaking every hand in sight, and you seem like a glass half full kind of guy. What would you say to people who are losing faith in their American identity right now? Because it feels like you still got faith.
Yeah, no, it's tough. I don't want to whisk past the graveyard, but you know, it's not a cliche. Every generation has to renew the democracy. And again, I will admit it. I would like to live in precedented times. I'm sick of living in unprecedented times. Oh, no governors. You know, I'm sick of that. I want normalcy. I don't want to see these people. But there's also an opportunity and a privilege for us to reimagine. And look, I think we're still exercising ghosts that haven't been exercised since the beginning of this country. I think they're just coming back out. I think they're raising their head up again, and we're going to have to deal with them. It's a wound that the scab is off. And so I think it's our responsibility. I think the privilege of being in that battle. And when I got asked the other day, they said, who's the leader of the Democratic Party? I'm like, hell if I know. I think it's the people who are out there. I think it's the working class. Because we are not cultish. It's pretty clear if you ask a Republican who's the leader of the Republican Party, because they can't say it fast enough, put on their red hat and dance to the tune. We're not going to dance to that tune, but we have a set of shared values. And so I am optimistic. I do believe, and look, I do believe that arc of the moral universe bends, but I don't think it bends by itself. I think you got to reach up and pull it some to get there. And I think we're in a pull it some place that we're going to have to figure that out. And I think we need to make it clear. This is the one that kills me on the foreign aid. I'll be quick. If you ask the average person how much the United States gives in foreign aid, you'll get answers up to half our budget. And many of you in here know it's less than 1/10 of 1%. And even if you don't care about that, foreign aid is American soft power that saves us. If you send the Peace Corps, you don't have to send the Marine Corps. And that saves us money, saves us lives, saves us treasures, make us friends. Those clinics are not going to close in Africa. If they close, they will be opened up again. And there will be a red star from China on that building, and those people will know who was there to help their child when they were sick to not be sick, and who do you think they're going to side with. And we're going to isolate ourselves to the point, not only from our values, but from our allies. And I think that is a horrible mistake. I think it'll cost us. So.
The clock is winding down. Just a few more for you. This is a bit of a personal question. Do you miss wearing your glasses?
I ran this, I'm freakishly fast still for an old man. I run 22 miles a week. I can still run 830 miles pretty casual. So I went running this morning. I put in my contacts. And I think it does make me look less old that I have to get criticized online. It's my vanity.
It seemed like you lost them right around the time you got the Running Mate gig. And I wonder, you're still out here, you're talking to us right now at South by Southwest. I saw you on I think Maddow. I saw you talking to Molly Jong Fast, David Remnick. Are you running for something right now?
I am not. I have the potential. If I would be given the privilege to run for a third term of governor of Minnesota, but I hope those are Minnesotans. But no, not. But my goal is, and I don't, the ticket. We just need to make sure that we have a winning candidate for 28, not because they're Democrats, but because they care about people and they adhere to our values. So,
you got a favorite?
No, not at this time. There's a lot of them. I'm partial to governors, so there's a lot of good ones out there.
You happen to be one.
I am really crapping all over Congress. I'm going to get the call. I think Elizabeth Warren's sitting backstage too. I'm not talking about her. So,
okay, Governor, I got one last thing for you. Because we're in Austin, and someone told me that Austin isn't as weird as it used to be, and she was lamenting that. I wanted to ask you if you've noticed something that's happening on social media right now with the guy who did get the gig to be
yes, my
vice
son
president.
sent it to me.
What did he send you?
He sent me a lot of them, and I think trying to figure that out.
A lot of what?
A lot of my opponent's memes that were. Is that what you're talking about?
I brought a smattering of them for you today to pick your favorite. We've got emo JD Vance here. Let's see what else we got.
This is painful for me because my son's going to say, yeah, all those, and he kicked your ass. So,
well, it was the other guy. We got Shaman JD Vance. We got Hulk Hogan JD Vance.
What is it with this? Does anybody know?
James JD Vance. The guy from Shrek JD Vance. Violet from Willy Wonka, J.D. Vance. Just a few more here. Minion, J.D. Vance.
What's behind this?
I think it started around the time they won, maybe a little bit before they won. People just started having fun with his face. This is like Sid's toy from Toy Story, mutilated J.D. Vance. This is actually my favorite.
Might be the one silver lining I didn't win. I can't imagine what they'd do with me. I don't know.
I think it's a JD specific meme. This is the Sphere JD Vance. That's actually my favorite. They get really weird. Kim Jong-un JD Vance. I'm sorry. Marjorie Taylor Greene JD Vance. We got the crowd's favorite. Two more. Melania with the hat JD Vance. And then lastly, I couldn't find Tim Walz JD Vance, but I could unfortunately find Kamala Harris JD Vance.
Well,
any favorites, sir, before we go?
Thank you for that. I'm not quite sure what to make of it, but I'm gonna take it. That was good.
Governor Tim Walz, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.